Hey YouTube, I'm back. Even though I've not been off YouTube, I did 3 videos in one day. The one where I smashed up that really crap guitar, and then the sustainer. I did them all in the one day, so I've not actually done a video for a few days. So I've finally got round to my new Squier Bullet. This is fantastic. Well, thanks for the 1,300 subs. Pure humbling. I'm going to do. I might do a video at the end of this, but I might just make it a separate video talking about that a bit. But first, Squire Bullet, 1983, Japan. Some interesting stuff about this. I basically bought this. I think I've actually did it in a video when I just called it my new guitar because I just had it. I wasn't after one. It just popped up for a good price with a dodgy switch on it, and I thought, oh, I'm sure it's worth more than that. I will buy that, fix the switch, and sell it. Didn't happen that way. Basically, as soon as we went into the guy's house, it was like, oh, the neck on this is unbelievable. It's what I think of like what a 50s Fender would be like. It feels, it's really rounded, and it's got I think it's got like I don't actually have radius gauges, which I should buy because they're like £1 from China. Just one of those things I haven't actually get round to. I think it's like maybe a 7.5-inch radius neck, which I don't have any of. You know, modern guitars are sort of 9.5 for the sort of curvy one, and then 12 for the sort of flatter one, and then you do get even flatter ones than that. But I think this is the 7.5, so it feels really like you're playing on a curved surface. One piece neck, which I really like. I mean, I much prefer a maple neck if there's an option for it. Obviously, you can't have an SG with a maple neck. That's just wrong. But on a Fendery type thing, maple necks are there, and the one piece, I really like the idea. Basically, I mean, it doesn't have a separate fingerboard. Sonically or feel wise, I don't know if it makes any difference. It's like, is it just in my head? I don't know, but there's something that just feels. I like the idea of it. Just really appeals to me. So it's basically one piece of maple, and the reason there's a skunk stripe is you need to cut that out to put the truss rod in. Speaking of truss rods, this is vintage correct, as in really annoying. Seeing as it's a Squire Bullet, you would think that they would put a bullet truss rod on it. No. It's in the heel, so you have to take the neck off to adjust the truss rod, which I think it maybe makes it look a little bit neater up at the top, but it's not as good a design. In saying that, it's not like it wasn't actually, even with griping about it sitting there, I had just me setting up for the first time and putting new strings on it for the first time, and I went in and cleaned the switch and stuff, so it's now working. I was kind of like, oh god, but I've got needs a wee bit, a wee bit more turned in the truss rod. That's going to be a nightmare. It didn't actually take that long. It only took it was like a couple of minutes. Basically, you just take. I just used the drill, took the bolts out, sort of stacking the strings, sort of tilted it back a bit, a couple of turns with the screwdriver, which is a really strange feeling because I'm used to turning, how much to adjust a truss rod because you've got like a lever that you put in, on the Allen key, whereas a screwdriver, it's kind of like you don't really know how hard you have to turn it much harder because you don't have any leverage in it, like you do with an Allen key. You're kind of, because you're moving it out from 2 inches from it. It's like the screwdriver, you're kind of like so, but it's sorted now. I've got the action down to quite a nice amount. It's still not super low. I'm not really. It kind of suits this guitar. I mean, even before I got it set up, I did take this into the studio before. Yeah, let's not talk about COVID, but we managed a couple in, and things started going bad again, so we've not been back in again. Down at my pal's barn. I might actually, if I had like a separate channel or something, I would put like for not subscribers, what do they call it? Patrons or something like that. Like maybe put a video down, but I might just put it down there, like unlisted, a video of me playing this guitar in the studio. The only thing I don't like about that video is Pat, the singer, who's awesome, isn't actually in the shot. He was kind of standing beside the camera when I was filming it, so I had my GoPro, so he's you can hear him. Apparently, I think you see his hand, maybe his face for like a couple of seconds in it, but that's kind of why I never really put it proper live. And this guitar basically seemed to invoke a spirit of Leonard Skinner in me for some reason. Maybe just, I was just playing Leonard, I don't know, and the song we were doing, it's like an original one, didn't really sound particularly country or Leonard Skinner until this guitar, and then suddenly it just made me kind of very much it just kind of fits really well with the Stratty thing. So I'm thinking of this as my only real Fender, even though it's not a Fender, it's a Squire. But Yeah, so the Bullet range, I'm just going to talk for a bit. I'll put a link down saying when I actually start playing the thing. The, kind of there's a history, sort of funny, like basically, quite famously, CBS bought Fender in the 60s, and so from then, and because CBS was like a big, big corporation type thing, they started deciding like, oh, why are we doing? Why don't we shave like a wee fiver off here and a wee tenner off here off the build quality, and we'll still charge the same amount of money, get more money, not as focused on making really good guitars the way it was when Leo was in charge. So basically, vendors kind of got less and less good up, all through the 70s. They started going plywood and blah blah blah, and that's kind of where all these guitars came from, like that one. These came from the early 80s. Or the late 70s, where the Japanese started going, hold on, why don't we build the best instruments we can rather than trying to make the most money we can? And that's why these are significantly better than what you would get from Fender at the time. They were superior instruments and they were half the price. But so Fender decided they were going to join in on it, and they were going to get the same factories. Fugijen made this one to make their own copies rather than somebody else making the copies of the Fenders. They would do this and they branded them Squire. So in 1981, somebody bought new owners came into Fender, and they kind of wanted to sort out the fact that they kind of lost their way a little bit. So they made by guitar players sort of thing, and that's one of the things they did was start hiring the Japanese companies to make Fenders. And they were almost in tears when they got the first batch in, because they were so good. They were so much better than what they'd been producing for 10, 15 years in America, and it was like pure, oh. That's when they decided they weren't going to be Fender anymore, they were going to be Squire. So getting onto this one, there's kind of two parts. There's the Japanese part. So Fender did a wee deal with Fujigen, and they were making, they called the JV, with the Japanese vintage series, where you had like a couple of Stratocasters and a couple of I think maybe a couple of Tellys and maybe a P-Bass, that were basically copies of like a 1960 Strat, a 19 whatever year it was, and they were basically, instead of copying anything they'd done since, they copied the one from the 60s. So these things were amazing. They were for the Japanese market only, and they did really well. And some of them were sort of sneaking out a wee bit importy, I think more into UK and Europe rather than to America. And for maybe a year or two, and then they decided they were going to brand them Squires. So this is Squire number SQ00016. So this is the 16th ever Squire, proper Squire, although he did get the JV Squires, which were sort of Japanese vintage, so they were kind of copies of previous ones, whereas this is actually an original design. The Bullet itself was designed, they were meant to do it, I think it was 1981. They were trying to make them in, I think it was Korea, and basically they couldn't get the standard, the quality up enough, so they were kind of abandoned, and then they made American versions of the Bullet for a year. The original Bullet is what they were doing is they were using up, it's a full scale neck, so it's sort of like a telly neck, you'd sort of say. The body's smaller, it's a bit squished. It's kind of not far off like a Duosonic or a Mustang sized body. It's not either of them, but it's that kind of thing. And the pickups, they were using up old single coils from Duosonics and stuff like that. So if you look at the picture there, you can see what they are actually is not a humbucker. It's two single coils stuck together. Basically the sort of thing I do with my bucker switch. But the thing is, it's quite odd about this. So they've got crazy covers on them, so they look like pure amazing pickups. I kind of expected something like this because you get 4 adjustment screws. They do actually say Fender on them. The videos, you can sort of see the Fender in the corner. So they're they are wired as a humbucker. So you've got like the two of them are opposite winds. So, and you get push buttons which coil tap them and uncoil tap them. But what I think quite strange about it is in Japan they didn't have huge stocks of old Duosonic pickups and stuff, so they made single coils and then botched them together or stuck them together like this, you see with a magnet down the middle, to make these humbuckers, even though they could just have put humbuckers in it because they were making them from scratch anyway. But maybe they were given you know, the specs were given. The original American ones aren't quite the same as this. They've got a somehow I couldn't really find a picture of it, but somehow they've got the scratch plate's metal, and the bridge is part of the scratch plate somehow, which you know, it doesn't really make much sense to me how that works. But the idea of this was to try and make it as economical to build as possible, but still to get a really good guitar, which is what this is. That's how, you know, things like the body, you can probably get away with. I mean, I don't know if it is a one piece. I'd be tempted to think it's a 3. It's pretty hard to tell, to be honest. Well, okay, that if you look at that, yeah, it's a 3-piece body. Whereas obviously, if you use 3 pieces of wood, you can get it to this size. If you were trying to make a Strat out of it, it would be 4. So, you know, it's slightly smaller. It's a bit simpler. No tremolo. This bridge is it's a top loady thing. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't be using. I'm using a smaller lead, which I shouldn't be using, but that's like pure that stretch there. So the bridge is kind of like sort of like maybe like a telly one, but it's got like wee keyhole shaped holes to put the string in. So I don't know if you can really see that. So you basically just put the string in and it just hooks around the wee hole. It's kind of very simple, but you've got adjustable saddles. Fender Japan tuners on it. Although this one does have extra holes that have been filled. I don't know if they're really coming out there. You can see one there. So I think maybe this has, I think these are the original tuners, but maybe it had other tuners on it for some years at some point when maybe someone had locking tuners on it or something like that. And then when they sold the guitar, they put the original ones back on again. At least I think that's what's happened. The switch says made in Japan on it. It's got big pots, quite good electronics. So quite a desirable guitar. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I wasn't really that aware of what it was when I bought it. I just thought, oh, switch. I can easily either fix a switch or stick another switch in it. That's it, sorted. And then be able to sell it for more. But as I said, as soon as I played it, it was like, oh, this is. I don't have a guitar like this. It's very, very nice to play. Plus the fact that it's the 16th one ever. There is a wee asterisk at that going, okay, it's not the 16th ever Squire because they did make the JV ones, but there's not that many of them. And this is like an SQ. So, I mean, how many millions of Squires are there everywhere? And this is number 16. Yeah, so I think I've maybe rabbited on enough about this. I've covered absolutely everything I know about these guitars. Well, bullet things, obviously now you get bullets. One of my favourite guitars that you can buy new just now is the Mustang Bullet, which is kind of not, it's very similar to this. You know, it's got the smaller body, it's hard tail, it's got 2 humbuckers, and it's called a Bullet. So it's kind of a very similar sort of thing. This is feels much more like an expensive guitar. Well, I think it kind of is. I mean, this is like, you know, rivaling your American ones you get now, just from quality. I mean, I think Japan, you know, they had something to prove really, and they were just proving that they could do guitars just as good as what America did. Quality wise, it's just bang up there, and it sits right in my favourite era of guitars, being from Japan and from the early 80s. So I'm going by these. They made these in Japan in 1983 and 1984. I'm going for this being 1983 because it's number 16, assuming they're sequential, and I'm not really sure how that ties in with the JV series. The JVs aren't what I thought they were either, because I had a shot of a JV P bass once and it was amazing, and I think I offered the guy 50 quid for it or something, and he was like, no, I wouldn't sell you it for 500, and it's like, but it's a Squire, you can buy a Squire in the shops for 100, and it was like, it's not, it was a Squire, but it's not the same thing. But the JVs, so those JVs are basically better than anything made since the 60s. But there's other JVs as well. So the very first ones were, you know, exact copies of the I think it's 58 and 61 or something like that, Strats. They're as close as you can get, replicas of the original guitars. And then, but when they came out in the UK properly, with the Squire badging, they were there was different ones. So you had like a top of the range one, a middle of the range one, and a budget one. So not all JVs are equal. I'm sure they're all probably pretty good. I mean, the bottom of the range one's probably this kind of quality, maybe. I don't know. But they're not all totally world beating. well, they're not, obviously, you know, if they're making guitars, they're not going to be selling one at 150 quid and one at 400 quid at the same, so the higher one must be better woods, and just better all round. Right, there we go, 15 minutes before I even play a note. So I'm playing through my wee laney there. I've rearranged my pedals a bit. I think there's a point, I've heard this before about capacitance with cables. The reason guitar cables are 18 feet long is once you go beyond 18 feet, you start noticing a drop in level coming through them because the capacitance is built up. The same things happen with my pedals. I've just ended up, there's so many true bypass switches you can have, you can't hear the difference. But then once you get above however many it is, suddenly you start noticing it being a bit dying. So I've kind of rearranged it, put the pedals that don't play over there and below the heater. I need to get another power supply for them. So just now I'm only running a tuner, well, the compressor's not got a power light, a wee rat, US Stream, a fuzz pedal, and then I've got an effects loop that's got the super fuzz, the Behringer super fuzz and the Washburn stack in a box in it. That's kind of all I'm using, and it just seems to have cleaned things up. I mean, it's sounding, this is all the pedals off. This thing just sounds amazing though. That's both pickups in single coil mode. This is the bridge pickup. This is the neck pickup. This neck pickup is a humbucker. Bridge is a humbucker. Both of them as humbuckers. Because you get the two switches, you can have so here is single and humbucker, and single and humbucker. So that gives you get 3 sounds as singles, 6 sounds as, and another 3 when you got them both as humbuckers, and then you've got so 8 sounds out of 3-way switch in the 2 thingies, which is lovely, and all of them seem to be pretty good. Again, I would always say the humbuckers really come into their own when you've got a bit of drive on. Yeah, so I'm not selling this one, I'm keeping it. I really like it. I kind of like its oddness as well. Just because it's kind of, what is it? It's got sort of funny pickups, it's got the buttons, it's got a telly headstock and a sort of Strat body, but not quite, a wee bit smaller, a bit more of a duosonic thing. And I think, talking about the coil splitty things, which is not really what this is doing, you're not really splitting the coils. What it does is, it is single coils and you're adding in extra pickups to make them humbuckers. So instead of being like a humbucker that's coil split, this is like a single coil that's increased with another single coil. Whatever, I don't know how that would work. I'm talking about it. Both the singles. I'm just choosing to ignore that annoying thing I did on the loop. That sounded, I don't know what that sounds like. Can't ignore it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do that lip again. That thing is really. I maybe just. I mistimed it a little bit. Now I've forgotten what the loop was. Neck, single. There's a humbucker. Bridge single. Bridge is a humbucker. Both are humbuckers. A wee bit of distortion on the Washburn stack of the box. Single coil. Humbucker. Single. Both single. Well, a little bit more drive, I'll go for the Joyous Dream. A bit more volume than that maybe. trying to put in my, trying to force in techniques, finger tapping, pinched harmonics, and what's the other one, the sort of mandolin thing, so we'll try and do that all in one go. Bridge, humbucker. Dodgy, I need to clean that washburn pedal. This is the Behringer Super Fuzz now. We're going to go for single coil on the bridge. Brutal sound is that Behringer. I'm actually quite liking it. I'm a little bit put off it because of that washburn pedal. Every time I stomp on it, it's moving the thingy, so I might actually have to take that washburn pedal to bits and change the input jack on it. Just got a slightly wobbly input jack, which is fine whatever it was before, but now because it's sitting next to the Behringer and neither of them have got Velcro on them, when you stomp it, it moves. Yeah, that's by the by though. So I think half an hour is probably enough time for playing this. So a fine addition to my collection of ever-growing guitars, and it's getting kept. I'm going to do another video. I can't continue talking now. I've already been going for half an hour. So this one might be going up tomorrow. It might be going up tonight. I don't know. Another one. So if I don't, if you haven't seen the other video, thanks very much for the 1,300 subs. The t-shirts are coming. I'm going to do it. Finally, I've got my pal Dava helps me run the channel. Him as a director, producer, or basically just bounce ideas off him, and he kind of goes aye or no. Quite a lot of the time, and then I either listen to him or don't listen to him. But he's like, get t-shirts, get t-shirts. That's like, I'm too lazy, but I will do it. And they'll be for sale down below at some point. So yeah, if you ever see one of these, just buy it. I think there's as I said, there's American ones for a year before this, which are slightly different. The basses, the guy in Twisted Sister used there was a Bullet bass, and they're really expensive because they were meant to be really good. So you'd be lucky if you can find one of them. I quite fancy one of them. It's sort of like a P bass, but just not quite, but it's pretty cool. I think there were, after the couple of years of doing the Japanese ones, there were Korean ones, which I don't think are as good. I've never played one, but if you look up online, but looking up things up online, you don't actually know, you know, it's all hearsay, and you know, one website says this, and then, or what it's happened, it's mentioned in a forum somewhere, then that gets copied and pasted, and then suddenly it ends up being because somebody had one, or no, it was pure terrible, and then suddenly they're all terrible, whereas that one that guy had, whoever had the terrible one, maybe they didn't set up, or it had a bash, or it was a bad one, or something, so I don't really know. I do expect that all of these, the Japanese ones like this one, are really good though, because it's just, the quality level of it's really, really high. It's also in the sort of colour that I would never normally go for. If someone said, you know, do you want a Strat? You know, a Fender custom shop said, I'm going to build you a Strat, what would you want? It would just not be this colour. I don't know what colour it would be, but it would not be super boring tobacco sunburst, but it works very well on this guitar or something. One of the things that I think maybe makes it that little bit better, just because it's not a Strat or a Telly, but it is a sort of Strat or a Telly. It's not a Duosonic Ara, but it sort of is. Kind of the middle. It's a 25.5 inch scale as well. There might be short scale versions of it kicking about, but it's great. There are sometimes called the Bullet 1. See what it says if you look at the actual star where it says Bullet, there's a 1 in there. That apparently wasn't an official designation. I don't know why there's a 1 in there, but you do get other guitars from this era, I think Fenders, that do have a very similar font. Okay, it doesn't say Bullet, but it's got that sort of star thing on it. It says made in Japan, and as I said, number 16. Rock on, everyone.